When you hear of Texas, you might be inclined to think of rural countrysides and cowboys. And outside of a couple large cities, you'd be right. I'm here to tell you a story that happened in one of those remote areas that I'll never go back to. Wait, I should first tell you who I am and how this all began. My name is Aaron. I'm a geneticist and I'm from California, and spent most of my time studying there. This all started when I was around 25. I was getting to the point where people were starting to recognize me and my work in the lab. I then got a phone call. "Hello, Aaron. Would you mind having a meeting tomorrow?" "Yeah, what time do you want me to be there?" 5 p.m. sharp. I was excited. I thought that I was about to get a big opportunity related to my work. Was I right? Well, technically yes, but at what cost? "Hello, Aaron. It's a pleasure to meet you. Please sit down. We have seen your work gradually get better over the years, and we wanted to call you in for an experiment." "What type of experiment is this?" "Before I tell you anything, sign this NDA, please." Basically, we have an experiment facility in the outskirts of San Antonio, Texas, and we want you to go there and experiment on people. Again, I'll ask, what type of experiment is this? "We will want you to inject certain substances into the test patients." "Will this be safe?" "It is uncertain. This will be our first trial. That's why I asked that you oversee the NDA to understand that this is not public whatsoever." "I apologize, but I think I'll pass, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, though." The man now hands me a sticky note with the number 2 million. I, of course, didn't question anything else after that point. I took my cash and signed all the contracts. The saying that everything has a price is sadly true, and I got prepared to head to Texas in 2 weeks. 3 days later, I was flown from San Diego to a small airport in the middle of nowhere. When I arrived, there was a man in an older pickup, waiting outside as I stepped off of the plane. "Miss Aaron, I presume. Right this way, please." As we drove, I looked out of the windows and attempted small talk, but this man was very short in his responses. After about a 2-hour ride, we pulled onto what looked like a ranch or a farm. Again, I'm from the big city, so I'm not sure what you would call it, but anyways. We drove about another 15 minutes and he pulled over and hopped out. He pulled a key card off his neck, and he pushed it against a large tree. I was very confused, but then I felt a strong vibration, slowly going from my feet to my chest. The ground opened up in front of us, and it looked like a ramp going underground. He got back into the truck and drove down it saying, "Welcome to the San Antonio Research Facility." I was amazed at the size of this complex hidden under a field in the middle of nowhere, and as we pulled up to a stop, I was in awe. The man now escorted me to a room, and then another man comes out of one of the rooms to greet me. "Hello, Aaron. I've heard great things about you." "Thank you very much. Where do we get started?" "I want you to go have a meeting real quick with the people in the room ahead of us." I then walk in to see that I wasn't the only scientist there. 8 other scientists and doctors were here as well. 2 of them were geneticists like me. 3 other ones were neurologists, and 2 of them were regular doctors. We all greeted each other and got to know one another. After a good 30 minutes of talking, the same man that led me into this room now pulls a file on the table and asks us to oversee it. The file explains the goal of the project and each of our roles. The goal of the project is to inject a modified version of LSD into the patients to see what will happen. My role was to check the patient's genetics after the project. The neurologist's role was to monitor the brain, and the doctors were there to just inject the substance and make sure the patients were unharmed. We all then got our equipment ready and waited for commands to head to the room where we would see the experiment.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Please follow.
We were then led to a room with a glass window separating all of us and the patients. The patients are now called in, and this sight still haunts me and fills me with anger to this day. Walking into the room, the patients were kids. What kind of messed up stuff was this? I turned to look at all of my associates with shocked faces as well. Do you ever see those posted pictures at Walmart saying missing kid? Well, guess what, most of them are probably taken by the government for messed up experiments just like this one. The two doctors now walk into the room, injecting the 3 children with the substance. We then waited for a good 30 minutes until we noticed changes in the way they spoke to each other. Instead of regular common use English, they started to use a modified and more efficient version of it, or at least that's what we think it was. At the hour marker, we all started to see changes in the color of their eyes. All of them had brown eyes, but now it seemed to be turning gray. This experiment was only going to last 13 hours, but at the rate it already reached, I was haunted of what other things might lie dormant. Hour 2. The neurologist concluded that the substance is causing a resetting of the brain. But now, one of the children muttered the word, "save." We all were left in puzzlement of what that was supposed to mean. Hour 3. One of the children, Cindy, starts portraying strange behavior. She starts off by staring at her hands and moving them in unnatural ways. At this point, I was really starting to question what type of modification was taking place in the LSD. And during my teen years, I had tried it, and what was being displayed with these children was not even close to what happens. "Safe," Cindy said. "Cindy, is everything all right in there?" one of the doctors said, speaking through the speaker. She goes on to repeat this word for a straight 30 minutes until she decided to scream it out loud, eventually losing the ability to speak. The doctors at this point had enough and attempted to open the door up and grab the children. But as soon as they had tried, many guards came in and grabbed both of them. Something was strange though. Cindy was the only child showing odd behavior. Rick and Gabriel just stayed there almost completely fixated on the wall. I assumed they were amazed of what was appearing on the wall, because from experience, anything on LSD can look unnaturally intriguing. But this was something modified, so I had no clue what to think of. All I could do was just assume from my past experience. Hour 5. Gabriel suddenly gets up and speaks to Rick with their new version of English. After the sentence was muttered out of Gabriel's mouth, him and Rick pick up Cindy and completely beat her up. At this point, all of us had enough of this and we all wanted out. But the man reminded us that if we break certain contract, things could happen to us. And if they were crazy enough to do stuff like this, they would certainly get rid of us. So, through fear, we continued. After a good 5 minutes of them beating up Cindy, they both in sync said, "Save." At this point, I had come down to 2 conclusions. Either this drug had caused them to believe in a structured religion that they had created, or they had just right out lost their minds. Well, you could say that they're the same thing, but I hope you understand that this wasn't easy to decipher. June, what do you see on their brain scans? Basically the same thing from hour 2. What seems to be a brain resetting. Hour 6, and they're speaking in a language that hardly sounds English. After a good 30 minutes, both of the boys pick up Cindy's beaten up body and now start to attempt to open her skull. At this moment, everyone in the room had to find something to vomit into. After a short period, they were successful in grabbing her brain out. Both of them now seemed to be studying every aspect of the brain. Maybe they were able to see things that we couldn't. After 10 minutes, they looked at each other and nodded in agreement. They both started breaking bits and pieces of her brain apart, and they now both took a handful of the brain parts and ate them. Now, this wasn't making them the typical zombie, but it was certainly giving them a cannibalistic trait. A brief moment later, one of the neurologists yells out, Everyone, come check this out. The brain scans showing an abnormality accruing in the brain. After they had ingested those brain parts, there is a spike of neuron chemistry in the brain. So, you're basically saying through eating Cindy's brain, they were able to gain more neurons. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened. Hour 7. The boys continue to speak to each other in the unknown language. Rick now walks up to the window. Even though he couldn't see us, he knew that we could see him. He then gives us this eerie grin with his gray eyes, staring deep into all of our souls, and then he says, "Save." Gabriel now seems to be in pain. He yells out in excruciating agony. But from what the neurologist said, there seemed not to be any sort of physical pain produced from this substance. So, if anything, Gabriel was yelling in a mental frustration of some sort. Hour 8. Gabriel and Rick sit in front of each other and stare at each other with complete concentration. They both, after a while, started to laugh. But this laugh wasn't anything natural. It was completely not human in any way. I assume that whatever this stuff was, it gave them the ability to use telepathy. So, one main thing all of us understood was that the main thing this substance caused was language adaptations. Hour 9. Gabriel gets up and starts to get frustrated. Rick tries to help him, but Gabriel outraged and started to attack Rick. Both of them fought for at least 30 minutes straight, before exhausting to the point where they couldn't physically get up. Towards the end of the hour, they had gained somewhat of a mutual acceptance that something else was more important, or at least that's what it seemed like. Hour 10. Out of the blue, Rick starts to speak regular English. "Can you please send in a doctor? I don't feel so well." We all knew better to even send a fly into that room. It was clearly a trap that we weren't going to play into. After we had refused, Rick dips his fingers into Cindy's blood and writes "safe" on the wall. While all of this was happening, Gabriel never took his eyes off the window that he knew we were behind. Hour 11. Gabriel stands up and gets Cindy's body and slams it into the window. He continues this for 30 minutes. All of us turned the other way and covered our ears. We all likely were saying to ourselves, what have we gotten ourselves into? Rick then laughs loudly in an unnatural way, until he broke his vocal cords like Cindy had at first, when she continually screamed, "Save." After Gabriel had grown tired, he started to look at Rick with desperation. Hour 12. Rick started to touch the wall in a very peculiar way. He kept on muttering, "Save," as he would touch the walls. Gabriel then creeps up behind Rick and chokes him, with every ounce of strength he had, with bloodlust like I've never seen before. He then proceeded to crack his skull open and eat certain parts of the brain. Like before, he again gained more neurons in his brain. Hour 13. Gabriel has never once kept his eyes away from the window. He gave us this stare as if he wanted us to experience the worst pain imaginable. The man who seemed to be in charge of this experiment then walks in. He goes up to the speaker and says, "Gabriel, why have you done all of this?" After a brief pause of him trying to remember the ancient language English he had once used, he responded, "Because I'm safe now, and I lust with every cell in my body to make all of you behind that window safe." The man now makes a command into his phone, and shortly after, guards open up the door and shoot the boy with darts. This is where I came in, and I was forced to examine the body after. What I found out was shocking. Once the substance was injected, it sent a code to all of his genes to redirect a certain way. It's still unknown. The neurologist noticed that this substance completely changed his perception of reality. That's likely what caused him to act so inhumane. After we had turned all of our reports in, we were told to head back to the room that we all had first met in. There, all of us looked at each other in complete shock of the events that had just transpired. I was the first to speak up. What did we sign up for? I just can't believe they convinced us to do something this horrible, one of these scientists said. The other scientists couldn't even mutter a word. They were completely horrified. The man now walks into the room. Thank you all for your work. You will be surely escorted out of this facility. But just remember this. Everything that happened here today will never be spoken of. And well, let's just say that we have tabs on y'all. After a couple of hours, they finally escorted me into a hotel nearby. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Matter of fact, to this day, I can barely sleep or socialize with other people. The 2 million wasn't worth it at all. I was now a rich man with a messed up mind. There was no point. What really messes me up is that these were children, no older than 12 years old, and that they had to endure such a horrible experiment. And I played a hand in this. Even if I wasn't aware of the magnitude, I still had a part in it. I write to you all here to finally let go of this burden that's been weighing me down for the past 2 years, hoping that this may help. Just know this. In the shadows lie nothing but pure evil. There is certainly messed up people out there that will do anything imaginable. Be safe and just know next time you pass by a farm, it might just be a government facility that houses down to the bone evil experiments.